I'd like to call to order this special board meeting of the Santa Barbara Unified School District for Tuesday, April 17th. Dr. Cash, will you lead us in the pledge?
Please stand. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We do have Spanish translation of today's meeting. I see Sandra Trujillo is here.
Good afternoon. Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Sandra Trujillo y soy la intérprete para la reunión de esta noche. Si alguien necesita de mis servicios, por favor puede indicar para proveerles con unos audífonos. Gracias.
Thank you. And we also have headsets for the hearing impaired. So, do we have any public comment today, Ms. Limon? Okay, that's coming up on.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, so we are going to dive right in to our action agenda with B1, approval of tentative agreement between the Santa Barbara Unified School District and the Santa Barbara Teachers Union for 7 furlough days for the 2012-13 school year. And I see Ann Peak is here to tell us about this.
I am. Well, I don't know if this is on. It took quite a bit of work on both sides of the table, but we got to an agreement where the teachers voted last week and approved 7 furlough days for the 12-13 school year for certificated staff. And we are just asking that you approve the tentative agreement.
All right, well, thank you very much. Dr. Cash, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I'm, this is one of those moments in time where you're both very disappointed and very happy. Disappointed that the state's fiscal crisis requires probably the hardest working group of employees that every school district has to have to take a pay cut. But also very pleased that our Teachers Association made the decision that everyone would share in the fiscal crisis as opposed to increasing class sizes and sustaining the layoffs, which the board had previously approved. So while it's not a good deal for teachers, it is not, and I don't believe it's a good deal for students. It's a very responsible response to the state's fiscal crisis, and one in which I think puts us in good stead and also gives us the flexibility if in fact the state's fiscal mess does improve after a potential November tax initiative.
Thank you. I guess I had one question about the 2 days that they would take prior to school starting. If we had good news in November, would we have a plan to somehow reimburse faculty for those?
They would come back after the end of the school year and work 2 professional development days, which would be the same as the 2 professional development days that they would not do in August. And they would be on the same thing, and that's the Common Core state standards, which is really will be the work of our district over the next several years.
Okay, thank you. Well, I appreciate the hard work that went into this. I know it was difficult. It was a really hard choice, but I also really appreciate the fact that the teachers came together with the district on this to make this work. Board members, any comment? Ms. Parker.
A few comments and questions. First of all, in terms of the 7 furlough days, for parents, I assume there will be some really clear messages about how the calendar may go one way or the other. And the idea is for students to miss the last 5 days of school. Is that correct?
That is correct. We'll be back before you with proposed change in the 2012-13 calendar.
And then parents would be notified that they would hear in November, hopefully, if there were. Well, first of all, will they be notified that this could change if the tax measures pass in November? That.
Yes.
And then if. And then the calendar would be extended by 5 more days.
Well, unfortunately, it's just as we experienced this year, it won't be a real clear message because even if the tax initiative fails in November, that may not be the same cut to our school district that the trigger is. So if you'll recall this year, the state did not meet the revenues that the governor had projected, but still we had a trigger cut, but it was less than what it could have been. So what we've agreed to do, which I think is a very responsible thing to do, is to meet and confer as soon as the election's over and continue to meet and confer until we actually know the fiscal implications of it. And it's complicated because this year, the first words out of the governor's mouth were a revenue limit cut plus a cut to transportation. Then that went through the legislative process, and the cut to transportation got recalculated into an additional revenue limit cut. So what we want to do, and the SBTA has been great in relationship to this, is wait until we really know what the true cut would be if there is a cut.
I'm just really concerned about parents understanding. I mean, it cuts both ways, both in that they really shouldn't schedule anything for their children for those 5 days in terms of vacations and things like that. And on the other hand, they may suddenly need childcare if there is no school. So it's just a really difficult position for parents to be in, and I hope that they're understanding about that.
We will be rapid responders and communicators in light of what we know and when we know it.
Okay. Another question is, in June, we'll have the 12-13 budget come back to us, and we'll be making budget cuts. This will be part of that. I assume that 7 furlough days for administrators will be also on that cut list.
Absolutely.
That's not something that's negotiated, but our administrators would face a Me Too 7 furlough days, same as the teachers. And are we currently in negotiations with classified?
Yes, we've
For
started
7 furlough days.
negotiations with them this week, and we're scheduled to continue next Monday.
Okay, great. And I just want to say a big thank you to the SBTA and to the teachers for the hard work on this. And I know that this is painful and will cost our teachers quite a bit of money, and ultimately it will cost our administrators and our classified staff quite a bit of money as well. And I just want to personally say that I will be out door to door to get the governor's measures passed in November. I will definitely be walking, making phone calls, and I think probably a lot of my fellow board members will too.
Mr. Herron.
Yes, I'd like also just to like to personally thank all the teachers. They're the ones that made it happen, and 7 days is a big number, and so they're the front line to our students. They're the most important thing we have, and yet they're the ones we asked to take the brunt of it. So I sure hope the governor gets his act together and people support him, and revenue comes in, and we can look at this and say, okay, we can rescind these. Sure be nice.
All right, well, I guess we're looking for a motion. We have one public comment?
We do.
All right, Mr.
Lane
Wheeler? No, you're on B2.
B2.
Well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and move to approve the tentative agreement between the Santa Barbara Unified School District and the Santa Barbara Teachers Union for 7 furlough days for the 12-13 school year.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No, motion passes 5-0.
Thank
Again,
you.
thank you for your efforts as well, and to the whole workforce, because at least we can keep it intact as much as possible, which is really to the benefit of our employees and our students. So thank you again, everyone. All right, we're now moving to B2, approval of decision to rescind reductions in force based on approval of PARS retirement incentive, and I guess we do have one public comment on this.
Lane Wheeler, President of the Santa Barbara Teachers Association. We'd like to thank the board for extending the PARS retirement annuity incentive, and we had a number of employees that took it, and obviously it's been extended, so hopefully there'll be a few more who'll find that a good opportunity. We are anxious to see the recension of 2830 teachers. We were under the impression that the recensions were occurring because of the 7 furlough days that we had taken. We're somewhat, I guess, enthused that this is coming as a result of PARS. So we have another group of roughly 40 employees that we need to get back to work as quickly as possible, and we're hoping that you'll take every opportunity to make that happen as soon as possible, since that we have now committed to taking a 3.5% pay cut. So we encourage you to make that motion as fast as we can so that we stabilize our workforce, and teachers know where they'll be working, students know who their teachers will be, and we can provide the best education possible. Thank you.
Thank you. And we do look forward to perhaps some additional news about once we reach the deadline of the extension of this. Ms. Peak, did you have some comments?
just have the item
Okay.
to present.
Why don't you go ahead and present it?
Okay, I'll
Thank
be
you.
glad to. Based on the fact that at the last board meeting, the board was able to approve our PARS retirements, at this point, we are able to rescind additional layoff notices that have been sent out. At this time, we will be pulling back the letters that were sent to 22 elementary teachers. And these are numbers of teachers as opposed to FTEs. So these are actual bodies, 22 elementary, 2 English, 1 science, 1 math. And our child development programs have some rather different calculations, so it comes to 1.6875 for child development based on the schedules that they work. Our hope is that once we are able to look at what the furlough day calculation comes out to, we will be able to bring back even more. So as that vote just was approved on Friday afternoon, this is the result of the PARS that was also approved at the last board meeting.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any comments? Mrs. Parker?
I guess my question is, by our next board meeting, next Tuesday, will we be able to rescind more thanks to the furlough days? Will we have that calculation complete? I mean, obviously, I want to get those
No.
notices sent out.
Not by
Not
next
by-
Tuesday,
Mhm.
but hopefully by the first board meeting in May, and certainly, if not the rest of them, all of the rest by the second board meeting in May. We're currently working on master schedules. You'll note the rest of them are in secondary schools. So we're working on master schedules, trying to make sure and with our enrollment projections. And there's a great likelihood that if not all will be rescinded. We just want to be careful in what we do and make sure that, that we actually have classes for the teachers to teach. So we're in the process of analyzing now.
Wow, well, that's really good news. I feel like this is kind of akin to water torture in reverse, where, you know, that slowly we're getting good news trickling back. I mean, obviously, the furloughs are not good news in the sense that our employees are taking a pay cut, but on the other hand, their jobs are going to continue, and the students will continue to have the benefit of those teachers in the classroom, and now we can rescind these additional folks and hopefully more. I frankly, I didn't know this was going to happen. I wasn't sure that this was going to happen, so it is good news, even if it's incremental. Okay, I think we need a motion on B2.
Well, go ahead. I don't have it in front of me,
I'll
so I
have it in
can't
front of me.
read it.
Okay, I'll move to approve the decision to rescind the reductions in force based on the approval of the PARS retirement incentive.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The motion passes 5-0. And again, thank
Thank
you,
you.
Ms. Peak, for your help on this as well. We are now moving to our conference agenda. Item C1, update on Measure Q, 2010 first sale of bond funds and information on proposed second sale of bonds. Mr. Hetjank.
For the first part of this presentation, I'd like to bring us board up to date on what we've done with our first sale, or almost spent first sale of $25 million. On the 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, you'll see a list of projects corresponding to the cash flow for those projects on the legal size paper. Some of these projects are in progress, some are complete, and some are assigned to architects, engineers for design and are not yet under contract for completion. If we did the Dos Pueblos High School asphalt replacement for the parking lot and cafeteria road, which we've indicated that we would do this summer, and the gym renovation at Santa Barbara High School if it gets out of DSA in time, and the intercoms at Goleta Valley, La Colina, and La Cumbra, we would have less than $1 million left out of our first $25 million sale, and that's what you're seeing on page 2 of the legal size sheet at the bottom of the fiscal year 2013 column, a balance of $958,000. So we have $958,000 left, and we'd still like to do a few other things right away. Number one, we'd like to spend a little bit more money on our wireless project. It's going to require a little bit more than we previously anticipated. I don't have a specific number for the secondary district as of yet. La Colina parking lot. We've been looking at that for quite a while. We'd like to try and get that done this summer. It is our largest parking lot in the district. It has no on-street parking for that school, no neighborhood parking. It's getting to the point where between tree roots and other ruts it's getting dangerous. The roadways going to that parking lot, entryways and exitways need to be redone. We also would like to demolish the 4 old portable classrooms that are sitting there, which is going to be the future site for the OAS library that's on that site. They sat empty this year. They're fenced, but it's only a matter before animals or other beings decide they want to try and move in. So we'd like to get those off site. Also, I'd like to try and get some roofing done at San Marcos this summer, the rest of the B wing next to the new wing, so we have a new continuous roof where that seam comes together. So in talking with Carl and Dr. Cash and then with Meg and our bond consultant, who I'll introduce in a minute, Johanna Bose, we say, okay, we're spending money at a good pace. We're not scheduled for another 1.5 years, 2 years for our second sale. How do we look with our bond funds? What do we have room for that we could sell some more? And we believe that through a combination of things that we can sell some more and continue work. And so basically this is kind of where we're at with Measure Q, what we've committed, what we have left over, a small reserve left. I'd hate to commit any of that $900,000 beyond what we have on this page just for uncertainties, especially with the wireless. I know we want to get that completed, and I know we're going to have to buy some more equipment. So I don't want to get too close to that 0 mark without being able to sell more bonds. And so first I'd like to ask if there's any other additional questions. I know you received updates from the Oversight Committee as to where we were with funding. Any questions on any of these projects, any of the things that are associated with them? I'd be glad to answer those at this time. Or you can call me back up when Johanna's done. Let me introduce Johanna Bose. Johanna has been working in school finance for over 20 years. She's currently with KNN as a financial advisor. She's previously worked as an investment banker and underwriter. She works as a district financial advisor, and she's been involved with our previous bond funds and financing. And whenever we have a question on, you know, can we do this, can we do this, how do we do this, she's basically the first one that Meg calls, and I get to listen in. So I get to learn a lot in the process. And in the past few weeks, I've learned a lot more about school bonds and sale of bonds, and so I'll turn it over to Johanna.
Thank you. Good afternoon. President Deacon, Vice President Limon, members of the boards, and Superintendent Cash, and Ms. Jete, right? I'm here to talk to you about a couple things that I've been talking to Meg and Dave about. So I'm going to go to the first slide. What my presentation is about. Well, how do you want to?
Secondary.
You want? Okay, we're going to start with the secondary. My presentation is 2 pieces. One is there 2 things I want to talk to you about, your bond program. I've been working with the district for about 2.5 years, and I've done a complete review of your program, which is always good to have someone who knows about when you issued, what you issued, who bought it, all those kinds of things. So you feel free to ask me questions as we go along. The secondary school district bond program, and I have just highlighted, this is just a format for you, is that historically in March of 2000 you passed Measure V for $63 million. All those bonds have been issued. In 2010, you passed Measure Q, which was great, and then for, excuse me, $75 million with a tax rate pledge of $12.48 per 100,000, and you've stayed with your tax rate. That was the tax rate pledge that you made in your tax certificate. As I said, you've issued $25 million, and you have $50 million outstanding. And down here's a little chart for you to see the bonds that you have outstanding from your current issues. This is a little history for you. So from the 2000 election, you have one series outstanding, and you can see it was issued in 2004. The original amount was 21 million. You still have 17 million outstanding, and the call date is 8/1/13. Those bonds right now, what I'm going to talk about, are refundable, which means that you can issue replacement bonds at a lower interest rate and save the taxpayer money. So if you go. And this is just a graphic. I like to have graphics to show what you've done. I think it sometimes helps understand, where money's going for the taxpayer. So your existing debt service is the red line, and the blue line is your tax rate pledge. And you see it sort of bobbles along there in the beginning. If you want to ask me that question, that's because assessed valuations have declined, and we have recalculated your debt service and what your tax rates are going to be using a more conservative tax assessed valuation of 2% and 3%. So I talk a lot with Ed Price at Santa Barbara. He always adjusts your tax rates so they're right on the mark. So you're in good shape. So the line is just to give you an idea that you have a lot of room in here to issue bonds. That's the whole point. You're way under your tax rate starting in 2016. Okay. So what is a refunding? And that's my first piece, is talk about the refunding. I know Dave talked about adding to your current GO program, so I probably should have done it in reverse, but I didn't, so I apologize. Refunding is similar to a refinancing. It's like refinancing your mortgage. Lower interest rates translate into lower debt service payments. So your debt service is less for your taxpayers to have to be taxed for. So we are in a very low, historic low interest rate environment. And also because many of your bonds, shorter duration, many of your bonds are matured, you have less debt service, which makes it more attractive. A refunding provides taxpayer savings because overall debt service is reduced because of the lower interest rates. And taxpayer savings can be structured to meet the district's goals. And what that means is that many districts right now, this does not relate to you right now, many districts have had problems with their tax rates because of assessed valuation declines. And when you do a refunding, sometimes you can push your savings up front, so you can get taxpayer relief right away, and it keeps them closer to their keeps them on their promise, in hopes that in 5 or 6 or 7 years it's going to return to the norm. We're not doing that. I just want to make you aware that you do have that option. And then there are 2 requirements for refunding that are very important. One is that your bond repayment period cannot exceed the original maturity, which in this case is, I'm looking at the wrong one, is 2029, so that it's not allowed. And 2, you want to have at least a 3% overall savings. You have to have a benchmark, and that is the benchmark. It's like everything else you measure. What's the average rainfall for Santa Barbara? The benchmark for savings is 3%. So that's a little about refinancing. Interest rates are very low, as you can see. I think actually my analyst got this line wrong. The top line is the U.S. Treasury, and the bottom line is the bond buyer. And because we're tax exempt, our rates are much lower. So, if you will. This is an actual presentation of what your new debt service would look like. So, for the wrong one. Sorry. Yeah, no, next, keep going, yeah. No, keep going, right there. So for Santa Barbara's secondary school district refunding, you'll be refunding the Series B from the election 2000. And this is a proportional savings, which means it's savings the same every year. And the solution takes into account current market conditions, so we used current market rates as of yesterday. And you have 8% savings in this particular refunding, which is very good, quite 5% above the 3%, which is very good. And what I've shown you is on the left-hand column is your outstanding maturity bonds. If you've never seen this, just ask questions. It's a lot of numbers for people, but I think it's important for you to see where the savings are. And here is the second column is your debt service before the refunding. Your third column is your debt service after refunding, and then your savings. So if you look at the bottom numbers, you'll see that your savings is $1.6 million gross savings for the school district, for the secondary school district. And these are your actual dollar savings on an annual basis. And this is, again, a graphic presentation of how you see your debt service is very level. I mean, it's all proportional for wherever the blue line is your existing debt service and the red line would be the new debt service. Now, to what Dave was talking about, because as I said to Meg earlier, you're very fortunate, and actually Superintendent Cash probably knows more than I do in this, is that districts either spend money or they don't. And it's great that you have a great facilities plan and people who know how to execute it, and you're spending your money on time, and you're creating projects, and it's great because the community can see that. A lot of districts never spend their money, or it's erratic. So I want to compliment you on on what you guys have done, what Dave has done with his facilities plan. So he's spending money, which is great, because interest rates are very low, and I think you can still get good contract rates. That's not my area, but I understand that from all the facilities people that I work with. So you issued 25 million bonds last year for Measure Q. You have an opportunity now to issue 15 million. Now, we came about that number working very hard with what Dave needed and what we could issue, keeping you in your tax rate, very important. The new bonds would be structured largely as capital appreciation bonds with a maximum maturity of 30 years, which is the maximum that we do for the school district. You can go out to 40 years under the government code, but we're going to keep it at 30. And the bonds are being structured to meet the tax rate pledge for the 2010 election. So based on our calculations, this is again a graphic representation. This would be the new debt service right here. And we'd be borrowing $15 million. Your tax rate would stay at 1248. And that's just a, and you can see you're well below your tax rate line starting out there. And we have little amounts of, starting in 2017, 18, little amounts of debt service added there, but not much, again, to make sure you stay at your tax rate pledge. Little familiarization with the bond issuance process. You, as a board, would pass a resolution that you would want to proceed with the new money part and the refunding. They're two different, they're separate transactions. They would be on one official statement, though. We would have, and that was the first step, and we would develop documents. We have a preliminary official statement and a final official statement that would be used to give to investors so they would know what they were buying. We would go to the rating agencies, which we did last year, and then we would sell the bonds, and then you have a closing. And the refunding actually just is a new debt service that goes to the county where they calculate a lower tax rate, all right? Separately from that would be the new money, GO, which would, again, stay within the tax rate. Ed Price knows how to do all these things. Because he levies the tax, but it balances out. Next step, if the board elects to move forward with the refunding, and we'll explain what we're not talking about, or Dave will, then you would have a resolution, and we had set that up for being on April 24th, next Tuesday. And that would be just your approvals for staff and everybody to proceed. We'd like to have you proceed. Then we will develop the documents and come back either at your May 8th or May 17th board meeting where you would have a final approval of the documents that would be used to sell the bonds. In the meantime, we would go to the rating agencies and get as much as we could done and probably try to sell the bonds either at the end of the month or the first week of June. Seems pretty simple, doesn't it? I hope so.
If I can interrupt for a second, just to let the board know, this is not a cash out refunding like was done in the past. This is strictly a refinance, which gives us more room under that curve to sell new bonds. And so I want to make sure that we're not mixing up the refunding, refinance terminology with the cash out refunding that happened 3-4 years ago, where we were waiting for the Attorney General opinion to come back in, if you remember that scenario. This is not that same scenario, so I want to make sure that that's clearly understood with everybody. And secondly, then you see under that curve that we have room to sell more bonds, and we can continue working. We didn't agendaize the elementary district, but there is room underneath that curve also, so on the 24th, we can bring you back information on the elementary district. We don't need to sell new bonds yet, but if we did a refunding, we could probably save around $1 million or so in the elementary district, and it makes sense to do it at one time because we save on consultant and legal and bond costs rather than doing them a year apart. And so I didn't want to go too far into that because I just said sale of new bonds on the agenda. I didn't put for both districts. I wasn't going to talk about the projects for Measure Q, but it's just my error in titling the agenda item the second half. I made it clear in the first half it was Measure Q. I did not make it clear in the second half that we wanted to talk about both, and we want to err on the side of caution so we're not in trouble with the Brown Act.
Thank you for that clarification. Board members, questions?
We do have public comment.
All right.
Should we take public
Sure.
comment now? All right. Mark Engels.
I'm sure we'll come back with some questions.
Sure.
Good afternoon, President Deacon and members of the board. My name is Mark Ingalls. I'm here today representing the Measure Q Oversight Committee, and here today to support staff's recommendation to consider issuing the additional $15 million in bonds for the secondary district. It's very clear, I think it was very clear when the measures were put before the voters that this money would not cover all of the project expense that the district had identified. But there clearly is a need. There's projects which we've been made aware of at the committee that are ready to go but don't have funding. I think it enables those projects to move forward. I think in the spirit of what the voters had voted for, they'd like to see those projects underway. I think that helps to show that we're spending those monies. Something that wasn't mentioned in the presentation, which I think is very important and certainly resonated with the voters, was this is an opportunity, a unique opportunity to create jobs in our community as well. And I don't think that should be underestimated, the value of what that represents in addition to the cost savings that the district could realize. So with that, I recommend that you heed the staff's recommendation and issue the additional $15 million in bond funds for Measure Qs. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, board members, questions? Mr. Herron.
Yes, Mr. Tay, originally we weren't scheduled to sell more bonds for at least another year, maybe 2 years. The initial response I had was 2015. How much more bonds do we have available in the bond measure itself? This is 15 million. What's left after that?
The total authorized by the voters was 75 million. So
right.
we've sold 30 and 15 is 45. So there's 30 million. My math right? 30 million left after that.
My question is by doing this, does that postpone the other 30 million to a longer period of time out front? Are we moving up 15 million, but are we sacrificing anything more?
No. If you look at if I go back to one of the charts, there's still, even with the $15 million sale, room under that curve for more. Mm-hmm. We just want to be a little bit conservative.
So when would you think we'd go back again after this 15 million is gone? What's the next benchmark we'd be looking at?
That's $64,000 question. I mean, as fast as we can push projects out and the board wants us to approve them, there's a point where you over disturb a site, and you don't want to get to that saturation site where you're doing too much construction everywhere at once to spread yourself too thin. But at this rate, we might be back within 2 years saying half of what's left. We may decide to wait. It all depends on a number of factors of are the prices good? Is the bidding climate good? Are the interest rates still favorable? Mm-hmm. And has our assessed valuation gone up as we predicted or not? It's all a combination of variables. The combination of variables are very favorable right now, where we don't have to stop work and wait a while and then sell more bonds and then get back up to speed. We can continue, and hopefully in a couple of years we're in that same position again.
So we're not sacrificing anything by pushing up the date.
No, we're not. In fact, we're saving in that 1.6 million in saving by refunding at the same time means we get a more favorable rate.
And you use the term, we've saved the taxpayers' money on this refinancing. And thank you, Mr. Hatton, for clarifying that it wasn't like the past one, because those are my first two questions. Could it be?
You can't do those now.
Well, that's what I'm going to say, but yeah, I was going to wonder. But so this is actually, we're just saving on our debt payment. And that allows us to have more room under the cap.
It's one of the most wonderful things about something that a financing does for you. Sorry.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win, and also, it's, as you said, it doesn't sacrifice the program. There are, I may acquaint you, a couple of rules that you have to do when you issue bonds, and one of them is that you have to be able to finish the projects within 3 years. Again, not going to be a project for Santa Barbara, but, I mean, there are guidelines that we talk about, that if Dave called me up and said, I got to issue another $40 million. Well, you first of all, you can't do that, and I want to explain that we have, and I should probably include this in my presentation time, we have this huge Excel spreadsheet that has all of your assessed valuations, all of your bond debt service. It's this big mega thing, right? And so we know everything that's happening with your bond program every year, everything that's rolling off, what your assessed valuations are, and if that's affecting your debt service, because the assumptions that were made in 2095, I don't have that information, and I probably know what the district does. So we monitor the program, so we know if there's a problem developing. So that's one of the things I want to reassure you that we are doing for you. And one thing in doing is we talked to the facilities guy, can I get 25 million? I said, no, you can maybe get 15. So I mean, it's a conversation you have. When I want to show you that the intelligence of what's going into this is never to compromise the districts, because you represent the taxpayers. I mean, that's
Okay.
my fiduciary responsibility to you is make sure that's okay.
When we say we're going to save the taxpayers' money, how do they see it?
Their tax bill, well, it's interesting. Their tax bill your tax bill would be lower. It's about $1 per 100,000. It's not a lot because this isn't a very big bond issue, which is nice that you don't have big bond issues. I mean, you can get districts that issue $100 million bond issues, they do a refunding, and they might see, a $2 difference. So I have to talk to Ed Price about how he does that, because he sets your rates a little bit differently than other counties do. And your tax rate has been the same for a number of years. I think maybe last year, maybe you took it up 25 cents, I don't know. So it's going to stay within that range. So normally I would say it would drop $1 or 50 cents, but I don't.
I think they would see it in that this bar is going to eventually, when it needs to fill up with the final sale, move a little bit further to the left, and it will drop off of their bills sooner unless
Yeah,
they, in
that's
the
true.
future,
That's
again,
true.
approve another tax. So we're saving them money, which means the duration of the Measure Q on their tax bill is going to be shortened. There's going to be $1.6 million that they don't have to come up with to pay back on these bonds. So they may not see it in their tax bill because we're selling bonds to push that rate
And what
back
year is
up
that?
to keep it level. That is 2042. You'll be around, don't worry.
So we can't push this as a tax savings to the, I mean.
It is a tax
Well,
savings.
if I'm a taxpayer and I hear you're going to save me money, I think more than $1. And sooner than,
Try being a
and
community
30 than, sooner than 30 years. So I don't think this could be pushed as a tax savings. It might be over a period of time,
Well,
but it's not going to give anybody even a Starbucks cup of coffee a year.
I think that's a reasonable remark, but I think also when you sit down with someone and talk about debt service and how it's paid back and what your tax rate really is, you find out that there's really not a great understanding of what that $12.48 means, all right? It's been the same for quite a long time. If to get that down to, I don't think you can get it much below that, because your bonds are really pretty short. 2029 is the longest ones from the old ones. I mean, it's just a matter of, unfortunately, it's a matter of math. So I will say that the community colleges that I work with have a worse problem because they have such huge land areas. And so you can have a 15% savings, which is huge, all right? And it'll be like 50 cents. Then they said, and I get oftentimes, well, why would I do this? So I can understand why not. Because to his point, you're actually just getting rid of over $1 million or $2 million of the debt service. That's what you think about the larger picture, if you will.
Thank you.
I need to correct myself earlier in case this is recorded and rebroadcast. Our first sale was 25 million, and this is going to be 15 million. That puts us up to 40, not 45. So we will have issued 40 of the voter authorized 75 in the secondary
In the
district.
secondary district.
Mrs. Parker.
I just want to clarify, is the idea, because when I look at the list now, the current 25 million, I understand that the wireless is going to be more expensive, but everything that's on this list is either out to design or for like the La Colina parking lot, it's in testing, something like that.
Or we've done some materials testing. I'd like to come back with you right away with design proposals for that, to get that, try and get that done this summer. And then on the intercoms, as soon as our electrical engineer has designed our 3 junior highs, we want to come back with Dos Pueblos High School. They're in need of an intercom upgrade. Also,
Well,
they
is
have
the
one customer.
idea that the
And
things
then-
that are out to design, that they would actually get done with this 15 million?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Since, this list doesn't say what the 15 million would be spent on besides some things that need to go
We're
out.
going to be going further down the list, and I think that'll be part of the RFP, RFQ that's due on April 20th for a master schedule assistance that we've put out.
So some of the things that were on our previous list that said start construction maybe summer of 2014, maybe they'd be able to start summer of 2013 instead?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
But I didn't want to go too far down this list and get into a further prioritization. I want to kind of not go beyond the period of time when we may have a consultant come on board to help us with the master schedule to give the board the total view at one time rather than us moving up projects and you approving them like we did in the past.
Mrs. Cordero.
I just had one question because Mr. Heron asked my other question already, but just generally, what would be the argument against doing this? Because it seems like we're looking at a savings, we're looking at trying to getting things done sooner. I mean, it sort of sounds like there's no downside. Is there a downside?
I don't believe there's a downside.
Okay.
I can't think of one.
Okay.
I mean, besides the upsides we've mentioned, it's benefiting the students, before they, give benefit to more students before they leave us. They're able to utilize and hopefully enjoy new facilities, kind of like when you collect your categorical money. You want to spend it right away on those students so they can enjoy it. It's kind of the same way. The tax rate is going to basically stay the same with the county treasurer's office, whether we sell them this year or next year. The voters and their tax bill isn't really going to see a difference, but it allows us to do more within those parameters.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Limon.
At the beginning of the conversation, the comment was made that this is not enough for the need that we have in our schools as far as our sites. I'm guessing that in the strategic plan that's going to come our way, there's going to be some indication of if we're spending faster and doing as much as we need, what happens when we have sold our bonds and I mean, we know now it's not enough. We're going to need to go out for.
We based our issuance on two
And
things.
how fast?
Basically, what the research said the voters would approve and keeping the tax rate the same, and that was that limit. So once those, rather than going to the list and saying we need X amount of millions to do this list, we said we can do X amount and get it approved by the voters. It's what they'll support, and it won't change the tax rate. Two different ways of getting to a program. So I would say that in the future we want to look at other capital campaigns or other methods of raising funds. We're actively trying to gain right now eligibility for state matching funds, which will, just like with Measure V, push out down the list further because we'll have matching funds come in, which means we can do more on that list. We're also looking at getting hardship money. There's two types of hardship money. One is financial hardship, but the other is a structural hardship where the building is in structural need of repair. And we have some old portable buildings where we may be able to get 50% money on replacing those, whether we replace them with a permanent building. They'll still give you 50% of what it will take to replace those. And we're right now investigating one of the portables at a school to see if it will qualify, get through the process, and then try and apply that more. So once again, I'm trying to find any matching funds I can to make our bond funds go further, as the board has always wanted me to do in the past. But at some point in time in the future, whether it's replacing old buildings or doing other things on the list as they become more critical, it would indeed be some other type of capital campaign or financing. And so the better we do with this one in keeping our promises and getting things done, it frees up room for the next one if the voters are so inclined.
So what I'm hearing you say is that by doing this sooner and working on some of the projects that we have here and others, we're also going to continue to find matching funds and additional ways of supporting this. That's not always going, one might argue you do go to the taxpayers if it's coming from the state. But it also means that we may find ourselves in a position to need to go out to the voters sooner rather than later.
Yes, I think it
Yes.
all depends on what the community wants their
Right.
schools to look like and how they want them to function.
If I may give you a little
So-
perspective on that, there are a number, there's a couple well-known election consultants that go around the state and talk, and one of the more interesting things that they have said is that when Prop 39 passed, everybody thought there would be these big mega deals. You know, you do whatever size your district was, you do your $75 million deal, you do your $200 million deal, and then that would be it, and you wouldn't do a deal for like 5 or 6 or 7 years. I mean, meaning an election, right? And it has not come out to be that way. And if you look at the election patterns of many of the school districts in California, you'll find that they are coming every 2 or 3 or 4 years because the facilities are deteriorating. Now, you combine that with the state's fiscal problems, all right, which you're acutely aware of after listening to, and because of Prop 13, your AV is restricted. I mean, you're familiar with that, how that's hampering everything that you're doing, particularly in the schools. So I look at additional elections as what I call a return to the mean. It's just that the voters always paid for their schools in their own town. We're voting for it. In the past, you didn't vote for it. They're voting something they probably would have voted for if we never had Prop 13. So I think that's an interesting, you have to, just a framework, you have to think about the bigger picture, what's going on in California as well. And then lastly, there are, of course, many districts who are up against their total tax pledge. For example, you pledged 1348. The secondary school, you can go to 60. No, you're unified now. I don't know how it works. Anyway, let's say your limit is 30 or 40. Some districts can't access their money, so they're doing another election, starting all over again. And writing a ballot language that goes back and says, well, we couldn't finish these projects, so we're going to move them over here and wait till AV grows. Think about getting your electorate to understand that. So, very interesting times right now, if that gives you any perspective.
Well, I hope that we're not in
No,
a situation where we have to ever do that.
No, I'm just saying that elections are a very interesting thing right now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, and I guess if there was a silver lining to the bad economy, the fact that the interest rates have stayed low and
Yes.
that we're going to benefit from
Yes.
them is good, and also the fact that we are spending money in our community, we are hiring local businesses, their employees are local, and so we're returning that money to the community, which is something that we always intended to do through these. So I think if you use the example of refinancing your mortgage, it's easy to kind of wrap your head around how you benefit from this, and it's 1.6 million over 30 years, but it is still 1.6 million.
But
And
unlike your mortgage, you can't extend it, which is good.
that's right, that's
Good.
right. But I agree with the comment made earlier about we would really like to see the students and the families in the schools right now to see the benefit of these elections and of the passage of these. And so going out for the bonds now makes sense, and I think it's a good idea. But I agree, we don't want our campuses to be under construction forever. I know when I was in college, I think my college campus was under construction all 4 years, and it does get a little old after a while, but it's nice to upgrade the facilities and do it soon. Mr. Herron.
One more question, Mr. Young. On your spreadsheet, on the gym renovation at Sunboro High School, if I recall correctly, that's $500,000 of bond money. But I don't see it on the spreadsheet. Does that come out of the $958,000
Gym renovation.
on the bottom of 2013?
2013.
It would come out of the 958. In fact, if we don't sell bonds, we would probably hold off on that project. We'd tell the foundation that we need to wait until we sell our second sale of bonds, because that would get us too close to our critical reserve by taking that amount of money out of the 958,000. I think our wireless internet is more important. We've had that conversation with the foundation already, that if a second sale of bonds isn't done soon, that the design can be complete, but the construction of that may have to wait.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Mrs. Bose. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Mr. Headyoung, for all the information. And we look forward to seeing this come back on the 24th. Is that right?
Yes, and it will be me that will be bringing it forward, because the rest of our team will not be here.
Which is why we're talking about it
Dave,
today.
Dave will be here. Okay, good. All
Okay.
right.
And we will have both secondary and elementaries
For the refund.
for the refund.
For the refund.
Funding.
The non-cash out.
no. And we didn't do the cash out. Remember, we were good and we waited for the Attorney General's decision and.
Then we did
Oh,
it anyway.
That's right, that's right, that's right. And then we undid it, and then we redid it. That's right. Mr. Herron?
Yeah, I never had the opportunity to thank Mr. Hetjunk. I was happy to see the board brief where the validation action was upheld by the Superior Court. So I know you shepherded that through, and it makes me feel a lot easier. So I appreciate the efforts that you went through to do that.
And we've had a lot of questions on the validation, and even a question today from a labor union is that, does lease back mean you're not paying prevailing wages? No, we're paying them. So there's still a lot of rumors out there on what it is, and the more people find out about it, the more comfortable they are. And I agree with you, validation makes everybody feel more comfortable.
Yeah, I'm very happy. I'm very happy to. I just didn't get a chance to say thank you till just now. So
My
thank
pleasure.
you.
Okay, we are going to adjourn from open session and move into closed session. We will be discussing E1, Public Employee Performance Evaluation Superintendent, and E2, Conference with Labor Negotiator.